Hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Fridays to our Literary Series and Technology 101. So I know I'm probably going to lose you all in the middle of this because technology has not been my friend today. And it's not because I'm an old fart and still trying to program my VCR. It's just because sometimes the world is very cruel when it comes to like needing to do things. But I'm really excited to have an old friend, AK Small, with us tonight. And let me tell you a little bit about, or even show you a little bit of something. Let me show you her bio, which is going to be awesome because I'm sure by doing this, something bad will happen. But there it is. So there is AK Small's debut novel, Bright Burning Stars. It was published in Algonquin Young Readers in May 2019 and released in paperback in March 2021. So very recently. It was one of BNT's most anticipated books of 2019, and the cover was revealed at ewentertainmentweekly.com. It received a starred Kirkus review and was a recommended read in the August issue of Cosmo. In addition to Bright Burning Stars, AK Small's second novel, Feather Girl, is in the works. She spends time on short stories. She's a short story writer. She grew up in Paris, graduated from the College of William and Mary, and later received an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts. So I'm really excited to have AK/AKA Angela Small read to us and answer some questions.
Awesome. Do you want me to start now?
Yeah, I did that pause, that dead air pause. I just take it.
So I was going to read from the second novel that I sold, and that's due out next fall, but I've been working on this other project. It's totally a work in progress. No one's seen it. And that's where all the heat is for me. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read from that because that's what I'm really excited about right now. So it currently doesn't really have a title. I'm not quite sure what I want it to be. But the premise of it is, what if Joan of Arc had a best friend? What would her story be? And so it's also a young adult novel that I'm working on. I'm going to read you guys the prologue, and then if we have time, I have a little bit of a scene of a different chapter. So it's called Prologue 1431. On the day of Joan's execution, I waited until nightfall, hidden in Rouen town square behind the flower shop. I waited until the drunken crowd dissipated, until everyone left Le Vieux Marché, until all that was left was soot, burnt wood, Joan's chains, and the acrid smell of thick smoke blanketing the sky. I tried my damnedest, but failed to banish the images of Joan tied to the stake, Joan lifted high on a platform for everyone to see, how men and women pressed around her, fathers carrying children on their shoulders for the little ones to get a better view of what a sorcière might look like. Joan's body burned for hours. After the executioner shoveled her ashes into sacks, the English dignitaries shouted, "The Virgin is dead." Joan, what was left of her, was flung over a cart on her way to Paris, where the men would finish off the job and dump her remains into the Seine. I thought to follow her murderers, to strap myself with ropes to those wagons, but when the horses stomped their hooves in the dirt, I stayed crouched behind the lilies of the valley, the violets and the roses. I waited, and when the North Star began to gleam, I trudged to the center of the square, lifting the hem of my dress, the ivory of my bottines turning brown. I paused where the platform stood, where hours ago Joan had screamed, and I had covered my ears and fallen to my knees. Ordered to add more logs to the already raging fire, the executioner had wiped tears from his eyes with his fists. Later, after he'd raked what he thought was all of Joan's ashes, he turned to the crowd and said, "We are doomed. We burned, not a witch, but a saint." Next to Joan's chains, I moved the cinders, looking, hoping for some kind of sign. I ran my palms along the ground, dug my fingers in the soot. At first, I found nothing. I berated myself for believing in the foolish powers of Hestia, the goddess of fire. or in Amphitrite, the queen of the sea, or in all the elements more than in Joan's beloved Catholic God. I was about to get up and go when the scar on my thigh began to prickle as if urging me to stay and to keep looking. With renewed vigor, I pushed a few pieces of burnt wood, the prickling intensifying. I looked more closely at the ground, and there, under a half-charred log lying in a small crevice, as if waiting for someone to see it, was a human heart, blackened on the outside but swollen still. I gently scooped it, cupping it in my palms. Pulsing, Joan's heart felt as fragile as the inside of a conch. I lifted it to the night sky, to sudden raindrops, and for a moment Joan appeared before me, dancing around our fairy tree, the great old weeping willow with a crown of belladonna in her hair. I saw us the times before the voices, and the many moons before the second pillage of Don Remy, when we swam at the waterhole and I gorged on berries, when Gager was far away, wore a word our fathers whispered only among themselves. Then I saw the night inside the church cellar where the course of our lives changed forever. I closed my eyes and whispered her name. Joan's heart weighed almost nothing in my hands. Joan, Joan of Arc, my Joan, ma Joanne. I brought her heart to my lips, and as soon as I kissed it, the organ shimmered, then hardened and shattered into a million dust-like diamond pieces, leaving me and everything around me sparkling in the rain. Was my discovery of Joan's heart in that crevice her final gift? Had she forgiven me? I yelled her name into the night, then ran back to the convent, getting soaked by the rain. So that's the prologue. And then I have just a quick little scene of chapter 4. And it's when Joan and my protagonist Zélie and her brother Gauthier arrive in Vaucouleurs, which is when Joan begins her adventure. It's past midnight, and they head to the center of the city. And there's some kind of party, and Joan asks Zélie to just find water and hay while she and Gauthier figure out a place to sleep. So Zélie jumps off her horse. It took me a second to get my bearings. I stretched, then made my way into the crowd. Aside from wooden tables with platters of brie, crottin, pont l'évêque, of grapes, rhubarb, strawberries, and pitchers of ale, meat, and beer, which I wanted to inhale but refrained from, I came up empty-handed. I was about to turn around when I noticed a stand of fragrant herbs. I made my way there, reminded of my mother. I leaned in and inhaled scents from the south, fresh lavender, dried eucalyptus, a sharp pang of nostalgia stabbing me. The music grew louder, people parted, and a group of dancers appeared. One wore a jester hat, his golden bells tinkling. Others were dressed in pantalons and skirts, clapping their hands and turning their clogs, striking the ground in unison. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I stared wide-eyed for God knows how long, until a dancer, bald and bare-chested, walked to the middle of the circle, joggling 2 torches and stomping his feet faster and faster to the quickening rhythm of the music. Above the lute and the cornemuse, the dancers shouted what sounded like "Allez, Baltar!" Perhaps I should have backed away, but I pushed myself closer, dying to see what this magician might do next. The boy or man swung the torches high into the air, then tilted his head back and blew giant flames from his lips. Le cracheur de feu, someone yelled. The square lit up, the stands around it, the people, the dancers in their circle, and the dragon man at its center, radiating like the sun. Flames above him crackled orange, yellow, and ochre. Time stretched. I discerned his sleek brown skin encircling around one of his arms from his shoulder to his wrist. As I began growing scared, would he catch on fire? The boy man retrieved the torches. He playfully rubbed the flames down his arm, then a spark dislodged, flew, landing on my dress, singeing the ivory lace on the left side of my décolleté. I swatted at the flare, but by the time I looked up again, the boy or man's mouth had closed, the torches and the flames were gone. The dancers crowded around him. There was thunderous applause and the jangle of coins being dropped into a satchel. A woman begged for an encore. My mother had told me stories about fire breathers, nomads, and travelers who came from far away, from sunny and rugged land, moon beyond La Rochelle, but I never thought I would encounter one this close to Don Remy. Zélie, I came to with a jolt, spun around, and saw Gauthier calling me from the fruit stand. I was about to head over and beg for a cluster of grapes, or better yet, for a cup of ale to calm my crazy heartbeat, when someone seized the top of my arm. "Forgive me," the fire breather said, scanning my face. His skin shone as if someone had lathered him with a layer of thick castor oil. His eyes were as dark as my mother's blackest ink, and he raised an eyebrow as if deciphering me. "I didn't mean to frighten you or damage your gown." He pointed to the place above my heart, to the tar-like smudge on the lace of my dress, and for a moment, I thought he might touch the rune thread. Do not apologize, I said, my cheeks turning crimson. Then I blurted, forget my dress. How's your mouth? Do not worry about burns. A flicker of amusement, perhaps curiosity, danced in his eyes. No. Swell, then, I replied, annoyed by his one-word answer, but glad for it too, for what I suddenly wanted was to touch la fente de ses lèvres, the crease of his lips, the soft place where they met, the urge so great. I dug my hands inside my pocket, then shook my head, willing him to go away. As if reading my thoughts, the fire breather released my arm and disappeared into the crowd. There you go.
All right. Great stuff. And that is a new project? That's not a piece of Feather Girl, correct?
Oh yeah, that's totally new.
So what is that? Is that going to be a novel? Is that part of an anthology?
Yeah, it's part of it. It's a brand new novel, and it's from the perspective of Joan of Arc's bestie.
That is awesome. So you don't even have Feather Girl out and you're on to the next. Do you think writers have to do that? Always be working on the next thing?
Yeah, I think you'd die if you just waited. Like if you just waited for your editor to get back to you, or if you just waited for your, publisher to take on a project. I think the only way to feel like a writer is to be writing something new.
Does it get stale if you don't write? In other words, is there a down period? For example, like when you run or you work out and you come back to it, you always have to go back a notch. Is it the same way for you with writing? Or?
That's a really interesting question. I feel like if I get off the bike, I won't know how to write it. Like, I just feel like I have to write in order to like continue to know how to write.
Is that just fear though?
Yeah, I think that is fear. But I also think that I get so antsy, sort of, what I do is when I don't write, I read. So I just go from like reading to writing to reading to writing. I sort of like, go back and forth. But yeah, I feel like I have to write. I'm so afraid that and even when I am writing, I still feel like I don't know how to write, but you just do it.
So you're working on a project. At what point do you feel that you do know how to write? Is it when it's finished? Does it keep you going in the middle of it? Is there always that doubt?
Yeah, there's always the doubt. But I think what happens is then I get lost enough in the project that the doubt sort of slides to the side, because then I really do get interested in what I'm actually writing. And so then I can really focus on the process of that thing coming to life, which is where, for me, really all the joy resides.
Dick Westheimer, thanks you for reading something new. So that's a direct thank you. Barbara Legier wants to jump back into Burning Bright Stars, which, do you mind talking about Burning Bright Stars?
Oh, no, I don't mind at all.
All right. So she's got a question. She said she watched the movie this week. And what are your thoughts on the movie of it? The movie version. The movie version is called Birds of Paradise, by the way.
Yeah. So I was lucky. I got to work with Sarah Dina Smith, who is the director, and she shared her screenplay with me. It's always conflicting as a writer, because you feel like somebody got really inspired by some art that you made, which is such a wonderful feeling of connection. But then a lot of times the person then goes off and sort of wants to do their own thing, and that's where you have to let go as an artist and sort of like say, well, here, now it's your turn to do something with it. So, I was partly so excited and partly conflicted on how much the story did change to adapt to screen.
Yeah, were you, I don't want to say disappointed, because you don't want to do disservice to the other project, but was it strange to watch it? Were there some points of the movie that you thought you might have done it differently if you were making the movie?
Yeah, I think that when you do any kind of writing, if you start to think of it visually as an author, I think you want all of the scenes that you've ever created to just be on screen, because you're attached to pretty much like every scene that you've spent 13 years trying to like configure. So I think that, but it's a letting go. So it's definitely not a disappointment, because I think Sarah Dina Smith came up with a fantastic movie. And I think the movie was, really great in its own right. But I do think that as an author, anytime a scene gets cut, there's a sense of loss. It's sort of like, oh, I wish that, the cemetery scene with the point shoes had been in it. I wish that you're always wishing for something different. But it's pretty amazing to have my book become a movie. Overall, it's great.
John has a question. It said the opening was very graphic. I'm not sure if it was what you just read or the opening of Burning Bright Stars, but he says, does that kind of thing get the book banners up in arms for a YA novel?
It must be from the Joan of Arc, because the opening to Bright Burning Stars was not crazy. Yeah, it's a fine balance to write YA, but I feel like the audience of young adults are able to take on anything that we adults take on. I mean, honestly, I feel like in some ways they're far smarter and more even, their ability to sense bullshit is just so incredible. So I speak from experience. I have a 23-year-old and 19-year-old twins. So I've gone through the teenage years. Yeah, all girls, and they just call you on stuff. So I always write as if I were writing to adults. I don't really ever think, oh, this person is not going to be able to, take that on. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
I mean, that's the next generation of reader, isn't it? You have to treat them as adults, otherwise you're going to lose them.
100%.
So Dick has a question. We're going to tie in. How is this not literary fiction as opposed to being called YA? And how do you feel about the distinctions?
Yeah, I think I straddled that line 100%, and actually think that it used to, when I was first writing, it bothered me because I was trying to figure out, like, am I a literary fiction writer? Am I a YA writer? And actually, I think that I am a literary YA writer. And so I crossed the line. I think that's how my prose comes off. But my characters, they're really truly always coming of age. It just feels like it's always really young adults that are put in a place usually that is pretty short. And they're, basically like, a year of being 17, or there with Joan of Arc, it's, 3 years of being 16 to 19. So it feels YA because it really is that age, and they never grow up to become adults. So that's why I sort of stick to this YA mind frame. But I think I'm both. And I love both. I read both. So it's not like I choose, it's just my writing goes that route.
You two had a serious dance career. You started at age 5 in France. And, were there, I know that people write from experience and the old, write what you know, but were there friends and lovers based on people that appeared in your book?
No, my book was purely personal. I know, I wish, right? But what I think what you, as a reader of that book, I think what the reader comes away with is the physicality of dance, which is what I remembered. So when I was writing the book, it was that whole intense physicality of the world of dance that I was reliving. And I think that experience I brought to the page. But yeah, no characters, no, yeah, I wish, yeah, no.
When you danced, were you injured often?
No.
Such grueling.
Yeah, I was injured a couple times badly. So it was, it's kind of like when you play basketball, if you tore your Achilles or something, you're just the worst. So, a couple times once I hurt my knee, once I hurt my ankle, and then you're just sort of, but not very often.
Do you think you have to be a parent to write YA?
Oh, no.
Okay. John then asks, that question was from Joseph. John asks, I assume you're fluent in French. How does knowing that language, or perhaps any language, affect your prose?
Yeah, it affects it completely. I actually have a really good friend who's a writer, and she is originally from Puerto Rico. So she is, she brings Spanish in her work. And I think for me, French is it's my mother tongue. So it gets infused in my work, whether or not I try. Like if I try not to, it just will sneak in. And so again, I feel like that becomes a strength. I think eventually you kind of use that as part of my voice. It's sort of part of my writerly voice to have the French get introduced on the page.
And you grew up in Paris. When we met in Boston, you studied in Vermont. Like, how does traveling affect your writing? And did you notice your prose being written differently when you were in different locations?
Yeah, the way I think of geography, for me, setting is like the most important thing in my writing, I think, or in like the motor, sort of like the motor of my writing. And so what I think of when I think of setting, or when I think of cities that are important to me, they're always sort of in the rearview mirror. So like I lived in Pittsburgh for 8 years, and I find myself potentially wanting to write about Pittsburgh more now that I've left it. And Paris is just the city I keep going back to because it's my childhood city. And so I keep it's sort of like it's like a stamp I have somewhere in my brain, and I just rewalk those streets, and it's become like a fictional Paris for me, not the actual Paris.
Well, Pittsburgh has become this really literary hotspot.
Oh my God, yes.
Like I love it. I mean, I remember visiting there a couple, like maybe 10 years ago, but ever since then, it always seems like when I'm talking to writers, like, oh, I moved to Pittsburgh, or I spent time in Pittsburgh, and like, that's just awesome.
Yeah, that was a great place.
What every writer wants to know that dreams of Hollywood, how do you get a movie out of a book? And was your experience, do you feel different than what you would give advice to do?
Yeah, I had it wasn't even something I was considering. I just wanted to get a book out. The craft of fiction and poetry are like, it is my love. Like, that's all I ever want to be around. And so once my book was bought by Algonquin, my agent called me out of the blue and said, this film agent reached out. She read your book. It wasn't even out yet. And she thinks she thinks she can sell it. So will you talk to her? And so I, got a phone call from this film agent who was really adamant, and who's like, I really think I can do something with this. And so I was so unprepared. Like I was like, okay. And then she took it, and I think we talked in February, and then we got it optioned. She got it optioned in June. And then somebody came back and said, we're really going to make this into a movie, but then COVID hit. So then we were like, right as they were making like 2 weeks before the movie was supposed to be done, some of the people got COVID. So they stopped it. They stopped the production. So then we didn't even know. We were like, is it ever going to be made? And then they finished and they made it. But for me, all of it was new territory. I didn't expect it. And I keep telling myself actually that with my next book, my worth does not reside on whether or not they'll be made into movies, because it's so rare. I really feel like it's luck. I mean, I don't
like winning the lottery.
It totally. So for me, it has nothing to do with my, with my gift or talent. It just happens that somebody really picked it, and there you go. I mean, had nothing to do with it.
Well, we've not talked about your upcoming book, Feather Girl. Tell us, before we wrap this up, tell us a little bit about Feather Girl.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So the premise of this, it's the story of a girl who is 17 and who loses her best friend, and who decides to go see a feather artist in Paris, one of the remaining feather artists. There are very few left. I think in Paris right now, there's 3, and there used to be, hundreds. And she enters the feather boutique, and she metaphorically and literally learns to build her wings and to kind of overcome this grief of losing a friend.
So were you fascinated by the feather folks when you were in France?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think what happened is as I was finishing my book on dance, I spent a lot of time, doing research, and I knew a lot about the Paris Opera, and they have what they call like a loft, an atelier, where they have seamstresses and people who make all of the costumes for the Paris Opera, which I was fascinated with. And then when I started reading on it, some of the things would be sent to a feather artist to work on. And so then, of course, I started looking into what feather artistry was like in France. And in the 1800s, they had, a feather artist was like a job that like you and I could hold. We could be a feather artist. And I found it really, it's dreamy. It's dreamy.
Did you try or practice, or we all practice and imagine hitting the game-winning homer in the World Series or growing up to be president, but did you fantasize about being sitting at home and like you were a feather girl?
Oh, totally. Being a feather artist, especially in Paris, especially in Montmartre, and is just the epitome of everything. I'd kill to be one. Yeah.
Are there art schools there that teach feather art, or like clown schools? There was a TV series with Zach Galifianakis that he went to clown school in France. Does that exist? Or?
Yeah. And actually, I think one of the feather artists right now is part of I forget if it's called like a conservatoire, a conservatory or something, where she now teaches and teaches back. So she has students who are feather students who are learning the art of feathers.
So give us a one sentence headline or teaser in French about Feather Girl.
What can I tell you about Feather Girl? Ça va être un rêve. It's going to be a dream.
Fantastic. It was fascinating talking to you tonight. And thank you so much for joining us. And
loved it. Thanks for having me.
And let me show folks, for some reason my screen share it's not doing what it's supposed to do. But yeah, there it is. So there is Bright Burning Stars. And Feather Girl is coming soon. It'll have a much better title than this, and the subtitle is not coming soon. So I'm going to leave that alone. Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much for being here and joining us, and folks that are watching the stream in the Facebook group. Thank you so much for watching. So what we can do is we're going to shut off the stream, but if folks would like to come in and join us and be part of the open mic, that would be really, really cool. You can just use the Zoom link and I'll let you in. And next week, we are meeting on Thursday with Aaron Tillman. So it'll be a very special Thursday, just like those old 80s sitcoms with Aaron Tillman. So please join us Thursday because I'm traveling to Los Angeles on Friday. So fantastic. Angela, fantastic. And we'll say goodbye to folks on the stream.
Thanks so much for having me. You guys really appreciate it.